What are your cruelest mother-in-law stories? So I'm still pissed about all of this. Knowing I have to deal with this woman for the rest of my life, I'm not very hopeful that she'll get more tolerable. I could use some advice on how to deal with a woman who believes only her own word and decided that other people's opinions and wants don't matter at all. First post about a super just no mother-in-law, so let's go. After a year-long engagement, I, female 18, flew to my home country to marry my husband, male 19. I'm American, so I'm not as conservative as DH's side of the family, and I knew that I would have to deal with some of these issues after the marriage. Living in a strict Islamic Sharia law country made our entire family think that it's okay for your husband, brothers, and father to control every aspect of your life. Thank God my husband is more modern and studied abroad, so he doesn't live by the same values. His family sadly isn't like him. Since we were leaving the country soon, we decided against renting an apartment and said we would stay at his family's house. I was completely against this at first because I knew what his mother could be like, and the conservative nature of his family was going to make me uncomfortable. But in the end it was the only choice, and since we were gonna have our own room, I thought we'd have privacy and could do things our own way. But of course they could never give us that luxury. My mother-in-law is so unbelievably unbelievable. I have no words to describe her. It shocks me that someone like her exists. Not only has she tried to control every aspect of our relationship, but she even had the nerve to tell me that she's responsible for me and decides what I can and can't do. During the wedding planning and shopping, she made things even more stressful than they were. In our culture, the man's family has to buy the bride new clothing, necessities, underwear, headscarves, pay for the wedding dress and the cost of the salon. But mother-in-law was texting my mom on the daily telling her what she should buy for me. Even the things that 100% the mother-in-law was supposed to buy, she was telling us to buy ourselves. And when she bought anything for me, she didn't ask my tastes or for my opinion on any of it. All the clothes she bought were ugly and looked like they should be worn by old ladies. The quality of everything was so cheap, and we thought maybe they would pour out some money for the actual wedding day instead. But surprise, my dad ended up paying for upgrades to the catering, for my new jewelry, for my dress, and for the cost of hair and makeup. The ceremony itself was a mess. They changed the venue 3 times and finally decided where it would be the night before. So we had people going to the wrong location and complaining that they were so confused about everything. Her worst moments came out after our wedding. DH and I were trying to enjoy our new life as husband and wife. We wanted to go out every night on dates and stay out late. But his parents told him that they didn't want us out so late and that we needed to be back by 11 because we were using their car and living in their house, so we needed to accept their rules. I thought this was ridiculous and paid no mind to it, but 100% of the time when we were out past 11, his mother would call and ask us when we were coming home, saying that it was too late. This started affecting our relationship because I would be out with my friends and my husband would be at home with his parents. They constantly told him that he should go get me and not let me go out with my friends, saying that I was being selfish for not spending all my time with him. Sometimes they forced him to come get me as early as 8 p.m. I was furious when he arrived to my friend's house that early one night saying that he's outside and we are going home. We fought so hard over this. I told him I'm an 18-year-old woman, I don't need his parents telling me what to do and when I have to come home. And he kept saying that there was nothing that he could do because we were living in his house. This continues to happen for a month, but slowly DH started coming for me later and later, usually around 10 or 11. This really upset his parents, but it was helping our relationship as the grip his parents had on him and his life weakened. The climax of this story occurred after husband went on a trip to Dubai for visa reasons. My controlling mother-in-law had her moments in the first 2 months of our marriage. She would always complain that I didn't iron his clothes because he did it himself and that I didn't take care of him properly. Now my husband knows I'm not a housewife and I will never be, but she refuses to accept this and says I can't run from my roots. Now dear husband had left the country and I couldn't go with him. My passport had some issues that would take 2 months to work out. For the first week of his trip I stayed at my in-laws' house because the plan was that he would come back in a week. but his visa was taking more time than we thought. So his 1 week trip became a 1 month trip. Now I sure as hell was not going to stay with his evil family for a whole month. So I packed my bags and told them I'm going to go stay with my half brother whose house is just 15 minutes away, but is closer to all my friends and family's houses. My mother-in-law was furious, and she immediately started texting DH telling him that he can't trust me to go there, and that she needs to be able to watch me. My husband told her that it's just for a few days. Now most of my family is toxic as well, but the problem here was that they were slightly scared of my mother-in-law. So after just 2 days of being at my half-brother's home, my mother-in-law and father-in-law call me saying they're outside and that they've come to get me. I was pissed as all hell and confronted my husband about it right when we got home. He texted me saying that she really just doesn't want me to sleep there and that I can go whenever I want, but I should just spend the night in our room. I told him I couldn't do that and I would definitely be going back. So I endured for another week, and it was terrible. She would constantly bother me in my room, lecture me about listening to your husband and in-laws, and tell me that my friends were no good because she believed that they were bad people. Eventually I couldn't take it, and when I saw my other half brother one day, he got upset with me over why I wasn't staying with them in their building while my husband wasn't here. I told him that no one else wants to stand up to my mother-in-law, and he says that's bullshit and that I should call him when I've packed my bags and want him to come get me. So the next day I do just that. I confirm with my husband that I'm leaving and won't be coming back for at least a week. He shyly agrees, but knows that his mother's gonna have a problem with it. I told him that I'm not gonna mention this to his mother and she'll find out when she sees my bags outside and me leaving out the door. I tell my father-in-law to give her the heads up that I won't be coming back soon. While I'm leaving, she asks when I'll be back, and I say after a few days. Right when my foot is out the door, she starts spamming my husband's phone with messages, telling him that he needs to tell me not to go, saying that I'm leaving without asking her about it, and how many problems he'll cause by not keeping me on a leash. That if he doesn't put his foot down, now that I'm never gonna listen to him. He tells her that it's his decision and that I'm his wife and she can't tell him what to do with me. She was pissed after this and continued to sending messages basically saying back quote, "Don't tell me I didn't warn you," and back quote, "I can't believe this girl." So after I'm there for a day, she starts calling and texting my other family that lives in the building, asking each one if I'm staying at their house, and they all say no. The only person she doesn't ask is brother's wife because she's actually scared of her. Lol. So I was finally free of her, and she didn't make much effort to contact me, but still complained to my husband constantly. I had the time of my life. Went out to cafes every day with my friends, got to see all the family that lived in that area, and just got to relax and be free from that crazy family. My husband and I are both in our early 30s now, but we're high school sweethearts. We met when we were 13 and were best friends for a few years before we started dating. We had a tight-knit group of friends and hung out as a group all the time. My husband had a traumatic childhood and was neglected growing up. In high school, we both worked and would buy his necessities, but so would my own parents. My mom even took him to an optometrist and got him the glasses he desperately needed. My mother-in-law was always very odd, but as soon as we started dating, her hatred for me became known, and I can honestly say with a clear conscience that, even when I was treated badly, I was still respectful and quiet towards her. She's very religious, and twice as a teenager, my husband, obviously at the time my boyfriend, would be hanging out at my house, and when it was time for him to go home I would be invited over for dinner. I would walk into his house to find chairs set up in a circle around the living room, and people from her church would be waiting for us. They would ask why I was taking her son away from her, and how could we be comfortable living in sin together. It was fucking bonkers, guys. I wish I was making this up. When we turned 18, he moved in with me and my family while we attended college and worked. We moved into our own apartment and got married a few years later. His entire side of the family refused to come to our wedding because she badmouthed me so badly. His older and younger sister loved me though and were in my bridal party. They have always accepted me and loved me and agreed with my husband that my mother-in-law was just crazy, and this is how things always were with her. I was pregnant a few months after our wedding and would get phone calls from his grandmother and aunt saying I was a disgusting human being for taking away their grandson and nephew. I was so stressed all of the time and would cry to my husband that I was sorry his family felt that way. It truly broke my heart to be so hated. They only hated me because my mother-in-law constantly bad-talked me. They refused to come to our baby shower. My husband put his foot down, called his mother, grandmother, and aunt and told them if they couldn't accept me, they would get none of us. They said that was fine. They didn't speak to us for 3 years. We ran into my mother-in-law one day while we were out when our daughter was 3 years old, and mother-in-law cried when she saw her. Explained she's been going to therapy and has gotten help. We believed her and gave her a chance. We allowed her to have supervised visits with our daughter and had a weekly dinner. A year later, my husband and I adopted 2 sweet little boys, both born drug addicted and with special needs. A few years into this, through a lot's therapy and developmental appointments, we find out they had fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, and our older son was diagnosed with reactive attachment disorder as well as oppositional defiance disorder. This past January, my husband and I were approached by 2 different people letting us know that my mother-in-law had been talking shit about our children, and she even told them that if I was a better mother, my son wouldn't have any of these diagnoses. I lost it. I broke down. For the first time in 15 years of us being together, I confronted her. I told her that I was her daughter-in-law and the mother of her grandchildren, and no longer would she speak against me or my children ever again. She didn't apologize, but agreed with me. Later that night, my sister-in-law calls me and says that her mom was running around the house speaking to herself and throwing things. My husband went over there, and my mother-in-law explained to him that she was a drug addict and she only spoke badly of me and her grandchildren because she was both high and drunk. She said she's addicted to Ambien. My husband and sister-in-laws told her she couldn't be addicted to that. She said she was also high on oxycodone. My husband and sister-in-laws pleaded with her to get mental health help. They knew she was lying about being an addict. The following day, she checked herself into a rehab facility and had my husband down as her point of contact for the facility. Days later, my husband got a phone call that they did a full blood test and found absolutely nothing in her system. She was embarrassed she got caught lying and tried to check herself out, but they offered her mental health services. Now, she has a few people from the drug rehab she was in calling her mom and always posting on her Facebook wall about how she's the greatest mom they ever had. I got a Facebook message from one of them a few minutes ago. They ask me why I took her children away from her. If you read this far, thanks. She's put me through a lot more, and I could honestly write a novel about it. I'm just losing my ducking mind and needed to vent. I'm sorry if this sounded scrambled or confusing. Here's the backstory. BF and I have been dating for a year. Before me, he was single for 9 years. He's only ever brought one other girl home, his HSGF, and he's now 30. TL. Doctor, BF's parents are overbearing, don't respect rules regarding privacy in our house. His father is disrespectful and yells at me. They want to come on our honeymoon. Things were friendly with his parents for the first bit of our relationship. Things drastically went downhill once we started getting more serious. We recently bought a house together. Once we put the offer in, his parents immediately started mentioning moving in, since we have so much room now, or to help us pay the bills. They have their own home that they're thinking about selling, and we in no way need their help paying the bills. They didn't say anything ugly about not being able to move in, but keep bringing it up. His mother even went so far as to bring it up to my mom, and seemed flabbergasted as to why they haven't been welcome to move in. In addition to this, they tried to demand we see them every Sunday. It was a family tradition for them when my BF was younger, but if we tried to make plans to do something else on Sundays, then they always just invited themselves with us. They never allowed us to have a week off. This all came to a head a month ago before the shelter-in-place orders started. They were invited to our home for breakfast and his mother kept trying to go in our laundry room and do our laundry. This is after she went in our room and closet and went through all of my clothes without permission when I wasn't home. BF talked to her and asked her to not do that again, but that very same day is when she started trying to do our laundry again. I don't want people in my laundry as I feel like it's private. I had also asked her previously to not go through it when they were helping us move. Since that day, I haven't spoken to her. On that same day, his dad, who is an alcoholic and yells frequently when drunk, yelled at me in my own home to get a life because I enjoy watching Food Network. I don't care what he thinks about my TV choices, but I do not want someone coming in my home and speaking to me that way. Lastly, when we started talking about getting married, his parents immediately started trying to plan a honeymoon. With them going along, they made all sorts of suggestions, like it was some sort of freaky family vacation. My partner and have been together for around a year, and I have an almost 2-year-old from a previous relationship. I didn't meet Mil for quite a while into our relationship, and as soon as I first met her she was talking about babysitting my son. I tried to be reasonable and let her babysit short periods, usually supervised, since I assumed she was excited to be a grandma and admittedly I needed the help. Over time she became more controlling over what happened with my son, going as far as to take him away for a weekend when she was supposed to be babysitting for a few hours. Whenever I tried to set boundaries she would brush it off and say she's already raised children and she knows what she's doing. Other than the obvious not listening, there are quite a few reasons I'm not okay with her watching my son at her house. She doesn't believe in baby gates and thinks